Welcome back to Ensuring Success. We are live from AMS Pictures in Dallas, Texas, and I am Gail Perry, Editor-in-Chief of CPA Practice Advisor magazine. We are here in our second session of the day out of 10. We hope you're going to stick with us for the whole day. Lots of great education and continuing education credit too. Before we start into our session, I'd like to just give a shout out to our sponsors for this event, which include Boomer Consulting, Canopy, CPA.com, eFileForBiz.com, Intuit ProConnect, Peisner Johnson, Receipt Bank, Sage, Xero, and Avalara. And in particular, this session is sponsored by Sage, as you can kind of tell by some of the accoutrements around the panel here. Before we start the session, I want to tell you briefly, if you weren't here for the earlier session today, how you'll get your CPE credit. We post 3 codes on the screen during this session. You'll see them appear at the bottom of the screen. I'll give you a verbal shout out to make sure you're looking at the screen when the code appears. You need to write down that code each of the 3 times, and then at the end of the day, when you're done with all the sessions you've attended, you'll go to the Get Your CE/CPE Credit tab at the top of your screen. And on that screen, it lists all 10 sessions. You'll enter the codes that you recorded for each session you attended, and you can receive your CPE certificates right away at that point. If you have any problem with that or any issues during the day, you can reach us at info@ensuringsuccess.com, and we're standing by to take all of your questions that you might have. Also, you can find us on social media, and we would love to connect with you during the day. So we are on Twitter at #DecemberCPE, and we're on the CPA Practice Advisor Facebook page. So we hope you'll check us out in those places, or you can email. So any way you'd like to contact us, please do. If you have questions for our speakers, please send them via email or Facebook or Twitter, and we'll try to get to any of those. I'd like to also introduce our speakers right now. I'll just give you their names and then let them tell you a little bit about themselves. So we have next to me Ed Kless, and then Gary Boomer and Greg LaFollette. So go, Ed.
All right. First, I'd like to welcome and thanks, Greg, for having me today, Gail. I am Ed Kless. I am the Senior Director of Partner Development and Strategy at Sage, and what that means is I am a meta consultant. That means I consult 2 consultants. So I've been doing that for about 15 years at Sage.
Well, it's a pleasure being here today, and I'd like to say hello to our audience out there. My name is Gary Boomer. I'm the founder, and my title today is Dot Connector at Boomer Consulting. We're a consulting company that works in the CPA profession, primarily with the top 500 firms, and technology has always been a passion of mine.
Good morning. Greg LaFollette. I'm almost as old as Gary, so when I try to do bios and backgrounds, it takes a while. But I am a CPA, practiced for a long time, left practice, worked with one of the major software vendors. So I've been a software executive, a practitioner, a journalist. I used to have the job that Gail now has. I consulted to the vendor community for a long time, and about 10 years ago I joined CPA.com. A few years ago I resigned from the executive team, and I now serve as a strategic advisor to the CEO at CPA.com. This is my 7th year of doing Ensuring Success, and it's one of my favorite events of the entire year.
All right, great. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for being here today. So all of us were moved by the book Life After Google, written by George Gilder, and we'd like to, after talking about it, we decided it was worthy of actually creating a session about that because it's such an amazing topic. So first of all, let's just talk about why would we even think about life after Google? Because isn't Google life itself?
Yeah, right. Well, I'm going to jump in and say, let's talk about why we should care what George Gilder has to say, right? George Gilder I classify him as an economist. I'm not sure if he would classify him as such, but he wrote a book in 1995 called Life After Television, which was the predecessor. And I just want to read a quote from that to just give you a reason why we should pay attention to him today. So this is from Life After Television. The most common personal device of the next decade will be the digital cellular phone with an IP address connecting to thousands of databases of all kinds. It will be as portable as your watch, as personal as your wallet. It will recognize your speech and navigate streets. It will collect your mail, your news, and your paycheck. It may not do windows, but it will do doors. Your front door, your car door, and doors of perception. And this is 1995, he said this about life after television, and here's where we are today with shows like Ozark and Man in the High Castle all come to us on our personal devices.
And had he written that in 2010, it would have been prophetic.
Correct.
The fact that he wrote it in 2004 is just a little...
No, 1995.
Yeah, 1995. I'm sorry.
1995.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
That's truly amazing. We barely had dial-up internet in most places.
Yeah, it was science fiction.
So, any thoughts on George Gilder too, Gary?
Well, I've been following George for 25 years, back the Gilder Report. And one of the things I found out early on is you have to go outside the accounting profession to really look into the future of technology. The accounting profession is a little bit slow. They're not on the leading edge with technology. And George was always one of those people that would talk about the convergence of technology.
Right.
And how it's not any one technology, but it's multiple technologies. The other thing I like about George is that he and Ray Kurzweil, who is another thought leader out there and really has done a great job of predicting when technologies will become relevant, they disagree. And to hear both sides of that really helps understand what they're talking about, and it's exciting to see them disagree, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree. And so let's bring it forward. I think that kind of establishes Gilder's bona fides in this topic. So let's talk about
Go back a little bit, because not only is the thing that I admire about Gilder is not only is he a technologist, he's also, like you said, an economist. I think a futurist that's truly grounded in the why things are going to happen, not just what's going to happen.
Correct.
The underlying economics of it is what has always impressed me is, Wealth and Poverty book, things like that.
Yeah, no, some great stuff. And I think what he can do better than anyone is understand what Ray Amara said when we said we tend to underestimate or overestimate technology in the short run.
Right.
But underestimated in the long run. And I think that this is a great example of that. I mean, it was this week, to maybe even to the day, where we sat in the green room of this very building watching Bitcoin go up $4,000, like in the afternoon, right? It was just this one day. And now it's less than $4,000 in total.
Right. So we won't see it go down 4,000 today.
No, we hope, well, maybe. But the point is that, with the previous session on blockchain, we definitely overestimated it in the short term, right? And there was a lot of, I think, conversations that were happening around Thanksgiving tables that drove Bitcoin through the roof at the time. But we're still now, I believe we're now in the phase where it's being dismissed as, oh, well, we told you that was just a flash in the pan, and now we're like, oh no, but now we're about to start to see it being underestimated in the long run.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's what Gilder has been able to solidify for me, is this notion of that we've underestimated it in the long run.
But you mentioned economist, technologist. I think he's also politically astute.
Correct.
And when you put those three together, you have someone that is pretty tuned in.
Right, right. Well, and I know we're almost up on our break here, but I want to just say, let's just establish this piece of it, because I think this is the foundational thing. Why are we going to have a life after Google? I mean, it presupposes, and he's not saying, by the way, that Google's going away, right? Google will be a relevant company 10 years from now, probably even 20 years from now. He's talking about the paradigm, the framework of what Google is about, which is free, right? And I think one of the things that's important from a foundational perspective is to understand from a political standpoint where Gilder is coming from, and that is he equates Google's philosophy of business as being neo-Marxist you're like, wait a minute, I thought they're like huge capitalists. He says, well, no. And he says, I don't mean it in that sense. He says, one of Marx's greatest mistakes was thinking that we had solved the mystery of human production, right? The industrial era had, we figured it out. We figured out how production was going to work. And now it's just a question of how are we going to distribute the wealth, right? And if you think about it, that's what we're hearing a lot of today, but just from the perspective of technology. Google and Apple and Amazon and Facebook and all these folks, they've figured it out. All their algorithms are taken over. The AI is taken over. We've figured it all out, and we're just going to have to sit on the beach sipping Mai Tais. And the only question is do we do universal basic income or not? Right, so it's the same thing. It's a neo-Marxist belief that leads to this notion. I think in the coming segments we'll explore some of those different things and the implication of that.
All right, we're going to pick that conversation up in just a minute. First, we're going to take a quick break to learn a little bit more about SAGE, and then we'll be back with your first CPE code for this session. All right, we're back, and I'd like you to take a look at the bottom of the screen where we are going to post the first CPE code for this session. It's a 3-digit number. You need to be sure to write that down if you want to get CPE credit for this session. So take a note of that first 3-digit number. There will be 2 more like it later on in this session. So be sure to take note of that. And we're going to come back with our panel. We're talking about life after Google. And before we dig in a little further, I think we'd like to ask each of you to tell us one thing that really stood out for you about this book that maybe was unexpected or that you agreed with, or something that really was interesting that you'd like to share with us.
That may be the hardest question I've been asked all year, because for me to limit it to one thing is the big challenge. There were so many things in this book that are worthy of further study. I guess for me it's just this notion of how, and I'll just pick up where we left off in the earlier conversation, how Google's model of free is at odds with its very own mission. Google's mission is to organize the information of the universe, right? And to be able to understand what that information means and parse it out as knowledge and give it back to us. The problem is that their very model, which is based on delivering free to about 90% of the people who actually use their products, it precludes the price system from effectively happening in that marketplace, and therefore they are depriving themselves of the very information that they need to survive in the long term. And that's the thing that got me. That was like, wow, that's really the issue. Is that what they are trying to do is at odds with a business model that makes them viable long term.
Pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
Gary?
Well, I think my big takeaway was over the fact that security and privacy is getting so much attention today, and it's so important to us as accountants, for ourselves and for our clients. And yet the freemium model is one where security and privacy is an afterthought, and how technology in the future is really going to have a foundation of security, privacy, and then the applications build on top of that. So that's one takeaway that I think we'll probably discuss a little more in detail. And I'm going to go to Greg, because if I keep talking, I'll get into 2 and 3 quickly.
We could take any one of these and spend the entire time.
Right.
For me, this is a very simple concept that probably everybody else had internalized before, and it was just shocking to me to see it put this way, that Gilder talks about the idea of wealth being measured by the increase in standard of living over a period of time, and examples like the poorest person in America today lives better than the King of France 400 years ago. So our standard of living has increased so much, but when you look down to the whole thing, knowledge equals that wealth. Knowledge is what has made that wealth. And when he writes, every single thing that is in our world today was in this world 100,000 years ago. The only thing that's different is the knowledge. So 100,000 years ago, we were going out and hitting animals in the head with a stick. And now we have a standard of living. But all of the things that we had, the raw materials, were there. This is the knowledge that has made that increase. And of course, Google takes that data and tries to convert it to information, organize it, and then to try to get to knowledge and ultimately wisdom. I think that's, Ed, what you're saying, that's where it falls down, because machines don't do wisdom. Mm-hmm. Machines do data and information.
But they sell your data.
There you go.
Yeah,
that's the price.
Well, and it was actually Thomas Sowell, I think, that I originally heard make that point, Greg, is that we are no different from the Neanderthals, with the exception of the application of knowledge to this, like this entire studio, this incredible facility, the Yeti mug, right? These atoms were here, right? It's just that we applied human knowledge to these things. And the secondary effect of that, which I think is equally important, and where this goes to a CPA firm, and why are we talking about this in terms of for CPAs, is because if wealth equals knowledge, then growth equals learning.
There you go.
Right? And that all growth is in the economy is the accumulation of more and more knowledge and learning newer things, including the falsification of a theory. And what I mean by that, and why this is so important, is businesses that go out of business, we still learn from. We learn that is an inappropriate way to have distributed that resource, right? And when we interfere with that in any way, when we interfere with letting businesses go out of business because we prop them up for whatever reason,
because they're too big to fail.
Because they're too big to fail, right? Or because they have pension plans that we have to pay for, right? That we are interfering with that learning from actually occurring, right? And every financial statement, every P&L statement is an opportunity to increase that learning. And I think that's something that a lot of accountants have lost over the years, to understanding that they are providing some extraordinary learning, not just in the technology space, but understanding that what the company is doing is a viable thing, and helping people do it in such a manner that it becomes more viable.
Gary, you've been talking for years about the financial statements being expanded to cover things other than pure financials, sustainability and comprehensive reporting and things. And that's really what the profession is poised to be able to do, is to increase the reporting and reliability of the entire enterprise rather than just the dollars and cents, right?
Absolutely. And I think that comes from the fact that oftentimes as CPAs, we give away the knowledge that clients value the most.
Give away the wisdom.
The wisdom, right. And we then charge by the hour for the compliance work. I'll get Ed started here one way or another.
We did that last year. Let's talk about life after Google. And another, I think, in critical point is that the understanding of what Gilder applies, which is Bell's Law. And I had not really, I've heard of it, but I hadn't really thought much about it. Bell's Law is a derivative of Moore's Law. We all know Moore's Law, right? There's a doubling of computer capacity and a halving of cost to produce that capacity every 12 to 18 months. Bell's Law is a derivative of that says that because of Moore's Law, every 10 to 15 years, there is a architectural shift, right? That it is a transformation that is enabled because of the constant application of Moore's Law, right? And then he reminds us that we're in roughly year 12 of the current trend, which is the internet, right?
And when you look at the practice of public accounting, in the 70s, we started sending things out of our offices to service bureaus. It was the rise of the service bureau. In the 80s, and I'm painting a very wide brush, in the 80s, we brought it back in-house with mini computers. We had AS400s and B90s and all these. And then in the 90s, we went from mini computers to microcomputers, and then we went to networks, and then we went to the cloud, and so that's exactly, it's about every 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And at every one of those places, and I've been around for all of those, and Gary, so have you. At each one of them, the profession screamed and cried and said, I'm scared and I don't want to change. But we got better off every single time. So I suspect that this time will be the same.
I would guess so. If you look what partner income's doing in most accounting firms, it's going in the right direction. It's just I think we're going to offer different services, and we're going to employ technology differently because we can. And I think a lot's been said about machine learning, AI, and how that's going to take us out of work. I disagree with the Silicon Valley elite some with their value proposition that algorithms are more important and valuable than people. I think that as accountants, CPAs in particular, we're going to have to upskill and learn new skills, and we're going to have to be willing to collaborate with people that are experts in business, but maybe not just in financial reporting. Maybe they know project management, data analytics, even sales and marketing are going to be important.
Oh my gosh.
Which I've been saying for a long time. But I think that is what's really going to change in even the smallest of firms. The way they deliver and the model that they deliver is going to be different. And the mindset will determine whether that's better or worse. So the skill set and tool sets, even though they may seem complex, are probably not as important as mindset here.
Right, and just to leverage off that, actually bring it back to the session I think we did last year on this, is the notion of, and you bring up data analytics as an example. Data analytics, it has for years been about what are the answers that we can get from the data, right? And now we're hearing the term data scientist, right, as a new suggested title. I think the role is extraordinarily different, though. Because I think if you think about what a true scientist does, is a scientist thinks about new questions, right? What are the new questions that we can posit against the data? It's not a question of data analytics was about extracting the answers from the data. Data science is about, we need to think about new questions we can ask the data. Right? And that's a whole new ball of wax, which is the same thing we talked about last year, which is this shift from CPAs being thought of as providing the answers, oftentimes to compliance questions, right? To now being, no, they're going to be thought of to ask new questions, new and better questions, because the compliance stuff is just going to happen.
So Gilder talks about this in this idea of whether or not AI is going to replace people, whether or not AI can be creative, the idea of consciousness, and kind of says, I guess maybe as I read into it, that machines can't be creative, and that becomes kind of the essence of consciousness is being creative. And all machines are going to do with all the AI that we're going to put in, they're still going to choose from a list of things that somebody gave them somehow. We talk about ingesting huge amounts of data. It's just a list of things. And so they come up with something and it looks creative, but really it's just random.
And computers cannot be creative by definition,
Correct.
right? Creativity always is a surprise to us, right? And this is another Gilderism from years ago. Creativity always comes as a surprise to us. And when machines surprise us, it means they're breaking down. Right? When a machine gives us a surprising answer, we're like, well, that's wrong. That's breaking down. In fact, if you Robert Heinlein's book, The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, that's how they understood that there was a problem with the computer, because it actually played a joke. It was playing a payroll joke. I don't know if you remember this. It actually added zeros to people's paychecks. So I think there's kind of a tie into that. But
that was nicer than HAL.
Yeah, exactly. Much nicer than HAL.
Okay, we're going to take another very quick break. We'll learn a little bit about Sage, our sponsor for this session, and after we get back, we'll show you your second CPE code. We'll be right back. Welcome back. And we would like to show you your second CPE code for this session. You'll find it on the bottom of your screen, a 3-digit number. You want to be sure to write that down. Keep it in addition to the first code you got for this session, and there will be one more later on, and that will be your evidence, or that will open the gate to your CPE form or certificate at the end of the day. So I'd like to get back into this topic a little bit, and as you were discussing before, we've seen these kind of seismic shifts in technology and the way accountants have been utilizing technology over the years. The most recently, I guess, was our move into the cloud, which seemed groundbreaking 10 years ago, and now it's just every day we don't even think about it anymore. So the fascinating thing I find about Gilder is that he's not only does he understand all of this, but he has been plugged into the technology network of creators pretty much since the 70s anyway, since it all became a thing. And he talks now about the fact that there is a next stage after our current stage at Life After Google. And it's already basically in place, but it hasn't been named yet. But he's tuned into it because he's tuned into all this. So in preparation for whatever's coming next, which we probably won't be able to even attempt to identify, but whatever's coming next after Google is going to be something even more useful to all of us, more effective for our clients, the work we do. And I guess my question is, how can accountants try and stay on the cutting edge of what's happening in technology when really it's hard to even see around the corner as to what's coming next? But we know we're never going to go backwards in technology. We're never going to go back to using a mainframe or handwritten spreadsheets. That's not going to happen. We're only going to go forward. So how do accountants stay one step ahead of that?
Yeah, I think he uses the term cryptocosm as his shorthand for it, but I don't think he's positing that as that's what it will be called. Right. So, but go ahead, Greg.
It's interesting to me, as I think about, I've listed those different jumps, those 10-year jumps, and for each one of those, moving from manual to service bureaus or service bureaus to mini computers, all of those jumps made it possible for the profession to do what it had always done faster and cheaper. That's really what happened. When we made this last jump to the cloud, single source of truth, all of those, it started to allow accountants to do things that they'd never been able to do before. We had this common spot, and nobody looked at what used to be the dirty word write-up to now the holy grail being client accounting services. Nobody looked ahead and saw that, I think, directly. So now we've got these these new things, or a new thing coming, which is the combination of life after Google, blockchain, AI, machine learning, big data, all of those things, because they're all really kind of the same thing. And that's going to move us, I think, to a spot where we're really taking that data, information, knowledge, converting it to wisdom, and delivering wisdom to our clients. I don't know what that's going to look like, but that's kind of what that's what I read of what Gilder's saying.
Well, I've got a little vision of that, and I'll try to explain it without a slide. And that's really what we call the continuum of value,
Okay.
where we start off, and with all this automation, we'll now be able to automate the transactional and compliance piece. And so as you move up the value chain, you get into advisory and consulting services. It takes different skill sets, different tools, it takes a different mindset, and that's where our profession right now is struggling, is how we can change that mindset to be able to deliver those services. And when we ask most in the profession, are you providing advisory and consulting services? And they say, no, but we could. And I say, why aren't you? And they say, we don't have enough time. So my analogy is you're too busy picking up dollar bills to pick up $100 bills. Mm-hmm. And then their next statement is, our people, they always project, our people aren't comfortable being advisors and consultants, or they don't know how to charge for it. Mm-hmm. So we get into a lot of different areas, but I think you're absolutely right. We have to transform, just like our clients are transforming, because technology is automating so many things in the world. And that's why last session, I think, really ties in with what we're talking about here, is we have new tools that are more transparent, more secure. We're just waiting for the user interface with blockchain, and then it'll be like the internet was in 1992. Yeah,
in the previous session, they were talking about the Wall Street Blockchain Alliance, and I had an opportunity to talk with Ron Quanta at the ITA conference this past week, and he's been a guest on my radio show as well. And one of the things that he said is, how will we know when blockchain's arrived? And the answer is when we stop talking about blockchain. Right?
I agree.
Right, because what it means is blockchain to me is shorthand for this thing that Gilder calls the cryptocosm, which is, and let me just try to summarize that in a couple sentences, because I can't get it quite succinct just yet. I'll be smarter a year from now and probably be more succinct with it. But it's this notion that right now with the current infrastructure, security on the internet is a bolt-on. Right? The internet, as we know it today, was not designed to be secure at all. Right. In fact, it was designed to be anti-secure, right? Open. It was designed for complete openness, right? But what we now need is we need this security layer, this trust layer, this crypto layer, right? This cryptographic layer, call it blockchain, call it Bitcoin, whatever, that sits on top, that verifies the trust. And these things are going to then be built into the tools. There are very few that are out there. Some of the examples Gilder gives in the book, and if you want to play with them, you can. Because I've been using, at Gilder's suggestion, the Brave browser for a while. It's Brave.com. I got no money in the company, right? So Brave.com, and it's a Chromium-based browser, so it's based on the same code base as Google's, right? But it's also based on the Ethereum blockchain, so that it is completely secure. It does ad blocking natively, right, as part of it, and it also has the tools built in to distribute and collect micropayments for attention that you as a browser, as a surfer of the web, give certain things. Right? So the notion is and I always try to, what's going to convince my mom, who is only on Facebook because she wants to see pictures of her grandchildren, right? What's going to convince my mom to leave Facebook, right? So people say, well, Facebook is they're a monopoly. We got to break them up, right? Got to break them up. We got to be careful what they do, right? So what will convince her is, well, if somebody told her, hey, listen, Peggy, we're going to give you little micropayments in real money that you can actually then go spend on your grandchildren at this other virtual store, she'd be like, sign me up today. I still see pictures of my grandchildren, and I get to make money while I'm doing this, sign me up. Right now, that money that she's being advertised to, who does it go to? Facebook and Google, right? And once the tools are built in so that the security is in one place, and here's the real problem. The more centralized all of these things become, even take, I know you're suggesting, Greg, do you have a password saver? Where you save all of your passwords in one place, right? Well, what's the problem with that? All the passwords are in one place.
Exactly.
Right? So the more we centralize all of this data, the more likely it becomes a target, right? Once it becomes decentralized, which is, again, what this browser is a first attempt at. I'm not suggesting that this is going to be the browser. It's a first attempt at. Then the stuff really starts to proliferate. And I think, what is this of interest to accountants? Well, because one of the things that they're going to be able to do is offer knowledge and services online that get fees from the attention that they're given.
Even if they're micro.
Even if they're micro.
That's the other part of it. The flip side of that I find interesting is, as a business, as an advertiser, right now I have to say to Google, I'm willing to spend $100,000 if you will show my ad to these kinds of people. Now in a new world, in a brave new world, sorry, in that new world, I can say I'm willing to spend $100,000, but the only place I spend it is for people who say, yes, I want to look at your ad. I choose to look at your ad. I like your ad. Mm-hmm. Thank you for sending me your ad. So that adds a level of efficiency that we've never had before. Before it was spray and pray.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, reduction of transaction costs, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Yep.
Okay, here's the question, guys. If we are the most trusted profession, which all statistics say that we are today, how do we monetize that trust factor in the future so that we can continue to provide value to the clients and they in turn will continue to trust us?
I'd say just off the top of my head it continued to provide knowledge that's out there and continue to grow your personal knowledge, right? So that at the time when this stuff does become monetized, you're there and ready, okay. Right? I think that's so how will we monetize it? I don't know. I don't have to worry about that. That I think is what these systems are going to do.
The
right?
market was a market.
We won't talk about blockchain, right?
No matter what happens, someone needs the function of attestation is always going to be important. I mean, we can have smart contracts, but if you and I have a smart contract, well, you had trust. A little bit.
A little.
If we are going to have a smart contract, I want someone to attest that that contract really does what it purports to do. And so our profession is the one that's always done that on the financial side. Why would we not do it? We're doing it now with SOC audits. Why would we not do it continuing into the future?
Well, I think it's an and proposition.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think you're going to continue to do that as a practitioner. But I think more importantly is how do you take all this data and be more predictive and add more value to the clients? And in other words, be forward versus backward looking, as many of us were trained. And in the future, Gilder points this out. It's not focused on the accuracy and the validity of the data. The technology will do that. But it's the meaning of all this data and how it can be used in business in order to add value.
Right. And we as a profession are going to have to continue to refine our training and things, but essentially we've got a profession that's full of master's degreed people. I mean, 5 year, 120 hours.
That could change too.
Right. So you have all of you got all of those people. You have software companies developing Sage and everybody else developing dashboards and reporting analytic types of things. But that's only information, kind of maybe knowledge. You know, it's our profession that has to do the interpretation and help the businesses help them. That becomes wisdom so that they can make better decisions in the future, as opposed to just reporting on the decisions that they made in the past.
That's the difference between CGMA and CPA.
There you go.
All right, we have one more break we'd like to take. There'll be a quick message from Sage, who is our sponsor for this session, and then we'll show you your third CPE code for this session. So don't go away. We'll be right back. All right, we are back. And if you look at the bottom of your screen, you should see the third CPE code for this session, a 3-digit number. Put that together with the other 3-digit numbers you have, and you'll have 9 digits for this session. That gives you enough to get CPE credit. So at the end of the day, you'll be using those numbers when you click on the it's Get Your CPE credit at the top of the screen, and that will enable you to get your certificates for all the sessions you attended today. And I think Ed wanted to share something about CPE credit.
Well, and it's slightly tongue-in-cheek, and that is most trusted profession, right? But we have the CPE system. What's the E stand for? This is not a trick question, I promise you. The E is for? Education. Okay. When you were in college being educated, do you remember having to, prove that you were attending, right? And do you remember having to being able to rate your professors as to how well the professor performed?
And I went to college in the 60s. I don't remember anything.
There you go. But you see my point, right? Is that the paradigm that we are sitting in front of right now, and this is, nothing, I think this is great stuff, right? But it's got it wrong. Right? If we're actually testing learning equals growth, right? How do we know? By them putting in
right. The value is the education.
Them putting in the value is the codes that they said. We're not testing them on anything they absorbed from our conversation. 0. Right? We're testing to see if they listened at the 3 appropriate moments to get the codes.
That's right.
Don't you see a problem with that?
That's what happens when you have regulators controlling education. And it's not just at the CPE level. It goes all the way to the elementary schools and before.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a very real problem. But my point is that is what this new paradigm can potentially replace, because the notion of a browser-based system that is measuring also the attention that you're truly given to the subject, right, is going to be of import, right? I mean, I don't know about you. I've delivered CPE, and I'm even not a CPA, right, for 15 years. And I have had people in my classes sit in the back reading a novel. And they get just as much credit as the people who participate. And I've always had a problem with that, right?
They have a lower bar than the people who are listening to this, because they don't have to stay awake to write codes.
That's correct.
That's correct. They just have to
walk in the door of the room.
And I think that's a very real problem that the AICPA in its wisdom has, I think, begun to address some of those things. Yeah, well, NASBA, right, but has begun to address that piece of it. It has to, right? To make sure that that's truly the case. But anyway, I think that's another example of this shift that's taking place. It's another example of it. We got to make sure, how can CPAs take advantage? Really start to learn stuff, guys. Like, really learn stuff.
Well, do you think, I mean, the whole new world with the Brave browser and the blockchain and all of those things bolted in, when trust and security become a a built-in part of the internet, just like today they pushed a button and we're using web browsers to deliver video and audio. It's just there, and there's a special protocol for that, but no one even needs to know that anymore.
Right.
So maybe we'll have the same sorts of things for micro CPEs and things like that.
Right. I mean, there was a time we were talking about this in the green room when it was important that, if not you, someone in your organization knew what the TCP/IP address of this computer was. Right. Now, no, I have no idea. Nobody cares, right? Because we don't. It's just there, and that's what Gilder's talking about, is that this cryptocosm is a new 8th layer. If you remember that 7-layer network stack, this is a new layer that sits on top of that stack. That is the trust layer that completely verifies that allows all of these things to happen interactively, and it's fantastic stuff. And here's the thing: I think because we're sitting on this in this 12th year of a 10 to 15 year cycle, it's starting to happen, and a little bit more rapidly than a lot of people think over the course of the next 3 years. We're at that precipice, I think.
That's what Kurzweil talks about, the law of accelerating returns.
Right.
We're at a much higher rate of change today because we've been in this computer business 50 years.
Yeah.
It's amazing, but what you've seen in the last 3 probably is equal to maybe the last 30.
Right. And the rate of change today is slowest that we'll ever see.
Yep.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. I saw a great stat the other day, just to follow up on that space flight has been around for a longer period of time than that period is longer than it was between space flight and the first flight of man. Right? It was like 47 years from the Wright brothers to first space flight. We're now past 47 years since first space flight. That's wild.
I want to throw out this concept that Gilder has about, and you mentioned a little bit before, we get rid of one huge, very attractive target and move down to a distributed target. And he talks about this idea of identity as a service almost, or I now own my identity rather than my identity being stuck in a whole bunch of places. I mean, for an example, if you try to change your address, it will take you 2 or 3 years to get your address changed in all of the places that you do business with. Imagine in a new world of I own my identity and I simply allow different people to point at my information, and I say, yes, I will share my address with you because you have to ship something to me or something. When I change it, it's changed. I don't have to worry that you're going to ship it to the wrong place. That's a pretty interesting thing, too.
Including all of your health records?
Everything.
Right. Yeah.
Well,
Important stuff.
Amanda Wilkie in our office thinks this is the #1 application of blockchain is sovereign identity. Because any person that goes to a bar or restaurant, they take a lot more information than they need to know. All they need is whether that person is 21 years of age. So this is all doable with the blockchain, and I think it could impact accountants a lot, filing with the IRS and the issues that we have there. That could be one of the first applications. So I think we're starting to see this, but just to expect to see it faster, because the trend in our industry is I'm a small firm, and that even is in the top 100. I'm a small firm. That probably won't impact the markets and my clients, but it's already impacting your clients if it's not impacting you. And it probably is impacting you. Those clients may be leaving and going someplace else, or will in the future, and it's the wrong clients that are leaving when that happens.
Exactly.
Right. Well, how many times did you get, why do I have to be on social media? My clients aren't on social media. I'm like, well, what are you kidding? So yes, you will be the last accounting firm with no clients who are on social media. Good for you. What does that do for you? Nothing. Right? Interesting stuff. But I'm just excited. There's the term future shock, right?
Tougher.
And I have future glee. Like, I can't wait for the future. Like, I was driving here this morning. I live in the area, so I didn't have to stay. And I'm like, you know what? I would, rather than actually paying attention to the road, I would much rather be prepping for this session. Like, heads down, like rereading the transcript or something of Gilder. So, like, autonomous vehicles, sign me up. I have absolutely no desire. I have future glee over this stuff because I really believe that this is going to significantly improve the human condition as we move forward. And I'm pretty excited about it. I don't know. What
my thing, Ed, is, and I have exactly the same. I dismay that I'm as old as I am because I want to see even more of this happen. The idea that I always have is when you're never there. This is not the last thing, and we can't even imagine what the last thing is. We talk in the book. He talks about you can't measure like AI. You can't measure something by reference to itself. So we can't look at technology, and it looks like this exponential curve is just going straight up, but it can always go straight. It can always go faster. And it is, so hang on.
Mm-hmm. I would say that the big thing that I see for the future is longevity. And if we can hang around another 5 years, we could live for another 50, perhaps.
Right. A big fear of our families.
Yes.
For every hour you live, you're short of living 15 minutes more. That's right now. That's so that's good.
But the technologists, and I go to the Abundance 360 every year in January, and the doctors there are saying that the next 5 years is going to be critical in sustaining and improving quality of life. And they're not worried about food supply or overpopulation. They just want to make sure that life is sustained in a format that's worth living. Mm-hmm. And they're working on some things right now that definitely will change our capabilities in the future. Absolutely. Medicine is one of the first areas here.
Yep, agreed. Well, Gail, I'll let you finish this up, but I hope, you said at dinner last night that you wanted some of these sessions to be like a dinner conversation that we would have. This is exactly what this was as far as I'm concerned, which is I found highly entertaining, so I hope the audience did as well.
I think so too. Yeah, I think the whole point of these sessions that we're doing is to bring you all into the conversation and make you feel like you're part of this and that you're sitting at the table with us. And we hope that we've accomplished that with you all. I guess I would just like to say, are there any last thoughts about concerns accountants might have for themselves or for their clients about being left behind? I know it's taken accountants a long while to even embrace the cloud where we are now, and a lot of them feel like they're just catching up. And are things going too fast? And what would be a sign, I guess, of someone who is being left behind, and what can they do to circumvent that?
So yesterday, or the day before yesterday in D.C. at Digital CPA, Barry Melanson addressed the group, and he talked about the definition of illiteracy in the future, and even now, is the inability to relearn. And that real literacy is the ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn. And that's kind of where I think the profession is. Tom Hood talks about always having your rate of learning exceed the rate of change. And as soon as that switches, you're in trouble. So I think the profession will do just fine.
I agree, and I think mindset is the key to all this. And I've always said, you don't have to know how to build the watch. You have to know how to tell time. And I think if people get too hung up in how this technology works, they're only going to do themselves a disservice. So hang in there, have the right mindset, and I think you'll be just fine.
I would just say, read Life After Google by George Gilder. If not, listen to the radio show that I did, thesoulofenterprise.com/Gilder18. There's a transcript of what we did. It was just a fun time to actually interview this gentleman. So, and thanks, Gail, for being willing to do this. Being willing to do this session. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you. Thank you all for being part of this. I think it was a great conversation, and I hope you all enjoyed it as well. We are about to break this session. We will be back at the top of the hour, and we're going to be talking about Wayfair and the SALT moment. So we hope you will be sticking around to join us for some talk about sales tax. See you then.